Greenland doesn't help Denmark. Denmark doesn't spend money to really help Greenland, but it's an important part for the United States. And it's surrounded by China ships and Russian ships. And that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It was Greenland that, and it continues to be, that should be controlled by the United States, not by Denmark.
Trump brought back up Greenland and the prospect that the U.S. is entitled to Greenland. He, interestingly, once again described Russian, Chinese jets, or boats rather, circulating Greenland. Interestingly, Becky, he hasn't brought up that issue on, his discussions with Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping. And yet somehow when he goes to Europe, this is always the threat that's top of mind for him. So that's going to irk NATO allies. The fact that he is going back to those claims, but also I think, the lack of reliability, quite frankly, the lack of any planning or seeming schedule when it comes to some of these shifting troop commitments. But look, at the end of the day, Becky, if NATO allies can get through this summit without a big blowup, without some unraveling of Article 5, they will consider it a relatively successful engagement. And you see Recep Tayyip Erdogan out there right now, lavishing Trump with the pomp and circumstance, the flattery, in an effort to diffuse some of that potential tension.
With the Trump administration's military actions in Venezuela and Iran, it's easy to forget that not long ago, the president was threatening to annex another territory.
We need Greenland for national security. We want Greenland. We are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not.
Greenland. The world's largest island is governed as an autonomous territory within Denmark, a member of NATO. Trump's rhetoric cooled off as the war in Iran heated up. But now, with the potential end to that war, is Greenland back on the agenda? Joining me now is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and staff writer for The New Yorker, Ben Taub. He has a new article out, Inside the Ludicrous, Deadly Serious Plan to Take Over Greenland. Ben, welcome. Tell us, for those of us who didn't realize this, the idea of taking over Greenland, annexing Greenland, is not something that Donald Trump has really stopped wanting to do, is it?
No, that's correct. And in fact, during his first term, while it did surface briefly in the summer of 2019 in the form of a leak to the Wall Street Journal that he hoped to acquire Greenland, it seemed like it disappeared from public view and that it was not very sort of long-standing interest. But actually what happened during the second half of his term is that the National Security Council formed a committee that was entirely focused on acquiring Greenland and accelerating Greenlandic independence in ways that would bring about a greater reliance on the US. So the professionalized national security class has been working on this for 8 years, really, with interruptions and breaks, no doubt, and turnover. But this is a longstanding pursuit of his that just because it's not in the news has certainly not gone away.
And there was a feeling around Davos that the situation had been diffused. Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, had sort of brokered some kind of compromise. But that again, it's just put the thing on the back burner. Trump still wants Greenland.
That's absolutely right. The rhetoric in early January, right after the kidnapping of Maduro and the operation in Venezuela, was so intense and the signals were so ambiguous towards the Danish government and all European allies that Denmark and 7 other European countries actually deployed troops to Greenland. And the Danes were operating under standing orders to shoot at any invading forces. They carried with them live ammunition. They carried explosives to blow up the Greenlandic runways in case of an invasion. And they also had blood packs in case of casualties. There was never an expectation that they would ever be able to defend Greenland for long against a full-scale, invading U.S. force, nor were there was there particular clarity that the Americans would do something. It was merely, as someone involved in the planning put it to me, it was to raise the cost, to send a signal to the Americans that if you attempt this, you are going to have to shoot at European troops and kill European troops because we will fight back. But as you said, Rutte did diffuse this. It's unclear exactly what he said to Trump. It may have been something that was kind of welcomed by the Trump administration too, just to give everyone a bit of an out when things were getting too hot.
And so what is the strategy of the Trump administration now to get Greenland?
Yeah, it's a bit of a refocusing and a strategic pause. Last year, we saw a lot of private influence operations by people who worked in Trump's first administration and are in Trump's orbit. Influence operations involving sort of goodwill, promises of money, promises of investment that never actually panned out, and things of that ilk. Now things are going in a more professionalized channel. The conversations since January have been through a proper channel between Denmark, the United States, and Greenland, where it seems like the US is doing and pursuing what it really could have done all along. The US has had with Denmark since 1951 a treaty under which it could expand its military presence pretty much however it saw fit. And until a year and a half ago, an expansion of a US military presence in Greenland would have been most welcomed by the Danes and by the Greenlanders alike. Now, the talk of expanding the presence arouses great suspicion in both countries. And it's a real shame because there's been so much damage to the alliance that something that should have been a routine sort of bolstering of Arctic security for all parties involved under the sort of NATO alliance and through this existing 80-year-old treaty is now something that, locals are concerned that an expanded US military presence is a kind of soft annexation anyway, even if it's a perfectly routine change and development in our Arctic security strategy. A few years ago, I was working on a different project about Arctic security, and I was living at the Norwegian-Russian border for several months. And as part of that project, which was about, Russia's nuclear submarine force out of the Northern Fleet and its ballistic nuclear missiles based on the Kola Peninsula, there was a lot of work I was doing a lot of work about Russian hybrid warfare operations in the region. And, it's sort of very sad to be using the same terminology when it comes to influence operations and sort of strange characters who are connected to the administration or in the Russian case to the regime, who have military backgrounds, who are doing activities that are obviously suspicious and then going back home and briefing government. The rhetoric and the language of the operations and the kinds of characters you're seeing are reminiscent of that work that I did at the Norwegian-Russian border in ways that make me profoundly uncomfortable and frankly sad.
European leaders were telling you that the reality for the next several years is, quote, a gradually stronger Europe in a weaker NATO. How do you interpret that?
Well, I think that's essentially accurate. The question is, can the gradually stronger Europe make up for the U.S. withdrawal, either physical withdrawal of troops? There hasn't been much of that yet, but there's much of it hinted. And the concern that the United States is pulling back from its traditional role at the center of NATO conventional defense. In other words, the Washington concept at this point is Europe takes more and more control of conventional defense. The U.S. remains at the center of nuclear defense. The problem is that every time the president settles on a strategy for this, he ends up undercutting their confidence of the Europeans that he is actually willing to do this in a orderly, rational manner. So last year, you'll remember, they agreed to spend 3.5%, the Europeans, European members of NATO, 3.5% of their GNP on defense and an additional 1.5% on infrastructure that would be related to that, highways, so forth. The president said he was satisfied. Today, he made it clear he wants that done even faster. In other words, it can't unroll over the next 10 years. It must be done faster. And as you suggested, he raised again American control of Greenland after they thought that they had tamped this down back in January.
Yeah, so that is once again raising questions about how committed President Trump is not only to the NATO alliance, but to seizing Greenland. This was something that many European leaders, that many NATO allies had been hoping the president has gotten over and was in the past. And he's once again just raised this as something he continues to want to pursue.